So what's next for former President Trump after his indictment? Joining us now is Fordham Law School professor Cheryl Bader.
Professor Bader is a former federal prosecutor and has provided expert analysis throughout the Trump case for CBS New York. Good morning, Professor Bader.
Good morning. It's nice to see you.
And now that you've seen the indictment, what's your reaction to the charges?
Well, each count in the indictment is really just an iteration of the same scheme. So this all comes down to falsifying business records. And there was one payment to Stormy Daniels. This hush money payment was divided up to reimburse Michael Cohen in individual checks, invoices that Michael Cohen submitted saying that he was actually rendering legal services. So each check, each invoice, all of those are falsified documents, but they're all part of the same course of conduct.
Were there any surprises yesterday with the indictment being unsealed? Anything that stood out to you?
So one thing that was a little bit surprising was that they did not charge a conspiracy count. So part of the indictment, one part of the indictment is just a list of the actual charges, and the other is what we refer to as the speaking indictment, the narrative. And there, Bragg discussed this scheme for catch and kill. In other words, to try to gather negative stories about Trump and not publish them in order to help him win the campaign. And so, but there was no actual charge of conspiracy. And that was interesting to me because prosecutors love conspiracy charges because it allows them to get in more information about even unindicted conspirators who aren't even charged in the conspiracy, their statements, their conduct. But it may be because in New York law, a conspiracy to commit an felony, which is what each of these charges are, is only a misdemeanor. So maybe Bragg decided not to bother. But that was surprising to me.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how serious are these charges? They are Class E felonies carrying a maximum prison sentence of 4 years per count. I mean, how likely is it that Mr. Trump, if convicted, would serve time in prison?
So they are felony charges, so by nature they're serious charges because he would be a convicted felon if he's found guilty. But I don't see any scenario where the judge gives him jail time, right? We're at a point where we're trying to actually decarcerate. So I think a judge putting Donald Trump in jail is unlikely. But I think Donald Trump doesn't want to have these convictions, of course.
So let's ask how the DA, Alvin Bragg's office, is going to prosecute this case. They've got some time, obviously, more time to prepare. But besides people like Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, who else might be called to testify?
So I think, we might see David Pecker. That's the National Enquirer CEO. And I think we'll see also lots of corroborating testimony. So Michael Cohen is a flawed witness in some ways, right? He's changed his story. He's lied. He's a convicted felon himself. And so I think we're going to see lots of corroboration in terms of phone calls and text messages, things that particularly show that Donald Trump was very involved in how this hush money payments would be made so that he has the requisite intent to defraud. And I think that it's really important that the DA get the jury interested in this is not just an accounting violation. This isn't, if they think this is just sort of a technical violation and it involves, infidelity, the jury may not be moved by this. So I think Alvin Bragg has to show them that this is really about Trump trying to manipulate the election and take away their ability to have a knowing and informed vote.
And what happens next? We understand the former president isn't due back in court until December.
That's correct. So in the meantime, there's a process of exchanging discovery, and that mostly comes from the prosecutor to the defense. And I'm sure that Bragg has everything ready to go and just can push a button at this point. But there's that exchange of discovery. And then I think we're going to see lots of motion practice. I think that, and motion is when the lawyers ask the judge for something on a legal basis. So I think we'll see motions to dismiss the indictment, either on the basis of insufficiency of the indictment itself, or because the judge has discretion in the interest of justice justice. We'll see motions around the statute of limitations, excuse me, and maybe motion to change venue. I think we'll see lots of motions coming from the defense.
Yesterday, during the arraignment, the judge did not issue a gag order, but did say to both parties there to keep it clean and let's calm down on the rhetoric. Then you probably heard the former president at Mar-a-Lago last night didn't really seem to heed that warning. What happens now? What could the judge potentially do?
Right. So I think the judge was right to admonish Mr. Trump and to say, look, don't sow the seeds of unrest. But the judge did not issue a gag order because gag orders are really frowned upon. He does have a First Amendment right to speak, and the First Amendment is particularly protective of what we call political speech. And this certainly is political speech. I mean, I think it's very impractical to say that, you know, the whole nation is going to be talking about this, but Donald Trump can't. So I don't think a gag order would be appropriate here, but I think it's very important that the judge let Trump know that he's watching him and that he's not going to let him turn this into a circus or really to do anything that could potentially harm Bragg and his team physically.
All right, Cheryl Bader from Fordham Law School, professor there. Thank you so much for taking a few moments with us. We do appreciate it.
Okay, it's good to be here.